Greetings. We are here today with Father Tom Meyer of the Diocese of Springfield, Illinois. Greetings and welcome, Father Tom.
Thank you. Greetings.
And what are we here to talk about today?
We are here to talk about the what do we think about going to daily mass on a daily, and let me give us some context. I came here late Sunday night, early Monday morning, and was with we've been to daily mass 3 times. First day on my own here at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Plano, went on my own at 8:30, and yesterday talked my brother into going down to near Irvin, Texas, and we went to the Cistercians and we were actually there at 6 a.m. for office of readings and morning prayer and mass at 6:30, and I loved it. And then Mom and I and you went to mass this morning at 8:30 here at once again Elizabeth Ann Seton, and just amazed by all 3 places, all 3 times, different contexts, the large mass crowds I noticed in all 3 places. When I was on my own on Monday morning, and then with the Cistercians, and there were probably my first time with the Cistercians, probably 25 Cistercians themselves in prayer, and I loved it. We were in the front for most of it, and we were there for the first 25 minutes, and it was just you and I, and then all of a sudden, I think there's a guy on the right side praying with us that were not Cistercians, and then by the time Mass started at 6:30, there's a whole crowd behind us, and I think I whispered to you that, look behind us, the crowd's growing.
There was a whole bunch.
And then this morning, day before Thanksgiving, a big crowd at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton again. And so the context is this, what's the big draw to go to daily mass, especially so early? No, 8:30 mass this morning was not early, but 6:30 at Cistercian Abbey was early. Our own Springfield Diocese, in about a week and a half, we're about to start what's called the Diocesan Year of the Eucharist for a whole year. This coming December 8th, next I think week or 2 from now, for a whole calendar year, focusing on the beauty of the Eucharist and trying to do different initiatives within our own diocese to draw people to the Eucharist. And so we're about to launch it ourselves in our diocese. So my big question is, yes, obviously the Catholic Church would like to see people coming to church on Sundays, but just pondering the question, what's the draw to come to daily mass?
Well, a couple of thoughts, I guess, from my perspective. Number one, I'm a regular communicant at Seton every day, and at least I've been doing that the last year. And as you saw, there's about 100 people in that mass with pretty regular basis on weekdays. I think when we were at Cistercian, there was at least 50, if not 75. For me, it was something I had decided a year ago, right about this time, where I'm like, I'm going to go to daily mass for Advent and just to see what that does. And for me, it continued on all the way, and I'm still doing it now. Now, contrast that a little bit. I've been to your church. It's a smaller church by far compared to Seton that you're responsible for, and you have a tenth of the attendees that show up. But tell me more about this year that your bishop wants your whole diocese to do with the Eucharist.
Okay, so December 8th, and I don't know a lot of the details, but the U.S. bishops nationwide are asking within the next 3-year period, they're inviting dioceses to do more and more to engage people back into the Eucharist again. The bishops nationwide recognize, COVID, and it wasn't just COVID. Things were declining before COVID. Back in, to 2020 is when COVID hit. The bishops told people, hey, for X number of months, you don't have to come back to church because of the concern of the spread of the virus. And so church mass attendance declined everywhere, our diocese, but everywhere. And then once a year later, bishop said, okay, come on, the expectation to come to church is now back on again. The dispensation has been lifted, come on back. And within our own diocese, which is reflective of dioceses around the country, the mass attendance was not where it was before the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, the numbers were steadily on the decline. So what the bishop's hoping in the next coming year is for parishes themselves to come up with their own initiatives to draw people back to the Eucharist, but just doing special things to highlight the Eucharist, highlight the teachings on the Eucharist, some of the ideas that the bishop is offering for us locally, offering Eucharistic adoration if you're not already. When people can come to church, anyone can come to church at any time, but special times of Eucharistic exposition where the Eucharist is present, exposed in a monstrance. So more time for that. He's recommending things like, for Corpus Christi, Eucharistic processions, which we do it in Quincy quite a bit. We do every year. And then he's offering the options of once a month. You can have a Eucharistic Holy Hour given a particular idea or topic to pray for. There's a whole. I was just looking at this before I came here to Plano. I was looking at what the diocese was recommending. Once a month, offering the opportunity for an hour of adoration for particular topics. January, praying for Catholic Schools Week. February, praying for engaged and married couples. March, I think, praying for pro-life, Annunciation, things like that. But holy hours he's recommending. But I know that what the bishops have also been asking people to think about is coming more often to daily mass. So these are just ideas our own diocese is trying to bring people back to church again by accentuating the importance of the Eucharist in our everyday lives.
Now, this holy hour that you're talking about with the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, is it meant to be a separate hour than you're already doing as part of your adoration period at church?
It appears so. You can either take what you already have and make it part of what you're already offering, or a parish could decide, well, hey, we're going to, we could tag it. We could, if we're having mass, for example, and we haven't talked about this just because it's all brand new. If you're having mass, a school mass once a week for your school, you could say, hey, after mass, we're going to just extend an extra hour for those who want to stay. We're going to pray for our Catholic school and invite people to stay. And the kids will obviously have to go back to school again, and parents and teachers as well. But there might be some who might decide, hey, for my love of Catholic schools, I'm going to stay an extra hour and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
And Seton did have, probably was 10 days ago on a Saturday. Seton, I was down with the Carmelites, I couldn't go, but Seton had an hour, I think it was an hour of Blessed Sacrament in adoration on some topic, I can't remember. It might have been prayer for peace in Ukraine and the Middle East, but I might be misspeaking. I know Father Bradley could correct me if he was here, but they just had that 10 months ago. So he did that. That's the first I've heard of it, and I'm guessing he'll be doing it more. But if the USCCB has started that, you're obviously your bishop is leading it, and so it's probably working its way down through other parts of the U.S. conference. But I guess you kind of started the conversation with folks going to mass, and is what's driving that, or is it your curiosity more about trying to get more people to come, or is it your observation that wow, there's a whole bunch here versus what you experience where you are? You want to take us a little deeper so I can
see in every ballpark. I've read this somewhere, and I think I looked at my own parishes where I've been I'm 24 years ordained priest, and this is pretty well universally true, at least for places where I've been, that usually whatever your numbers are on Sunday, as far as Sunday Mass throughout the weekend, usually you can expect about 1% of that group will be there for daily Mass. So places where I've been before, that holds pretty well true, that about 1%. So I'm guessing our own parish in Quincy, I think we probably have, we probably bring in 500 in a weekend. So what would 1% be of that? 5. Well, we do better than 5. We probably have a daily Mass, and it changes day by day throughout the week, but we probably have 15 to 18, 19 people altogether, which that's better than 1%.
See, and I would say that Seton, it's certainly better than 1% in 100. I mean, I'm guessing maybe there's 10,000 that come on a weekend through all the different masses, and so 10 would be 1%, 20 would be 2%, but we're at 100-ish.
5.
So it's certainly more than that. And Seton seems more vibrant than it was at St. Mark's. When I was there, 20, 30 years ago, we only had, I think, 30-ish daily Mass, because back in the 80s, I toyed a little bit with doing daily Mass, but I was with kids. I was too busy at the time. So, but I personally chose to do Mass is something sort of different. Part of it was because I was doing daily Mass up at your church for those 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks I was up there. I think 1 week you were gone. But I was like, well, let's try daily Mass and see what happens. And then my working with the Carmelite seculars, it becomes actually an obligation to do that, although I'm only in early formation, as you know. But for me, I used to do what I call in term pop-ins. I'd pop into church once a week, which I kind of don't do now, as I think I told you, because I'm in there every day anyway, and can kind of converse with God as much as I need to. But it was even, I think Matthew Kelly was promoting, a popular Christian or Catholic author was even had confessed in one of his books that he's a pop-in guy as well, to the church to just to hang out. So I don't know. I guess part of it has to come from your calling, right? You have to either feel like you have a need to go into church, and some think that they can do whatever conversations they want to have at the house, right? So you don't have to be in church to talk to God. You can talk to God, right here where you are, which is, just in my house. But is part of your thinking, finding ways to draw people in that aren't coming?
No, it was something. Obviously, as a priest, you always want to do. You're always thinking of things, to draw people. But my thought process simply, things I've seen here since I've been here in Plano. What has caught my attention, and what's caught my attention is, wow, we have really, 3 straight days. We've had really nice daily mass crowds, and that's something that's kind of neat. And I just want to explore that more. I mean, obviously, any insights I'm always happy to take back to my people, but really it's just a more natural curiosity. When we were down at the Cistercian for mass, we saw a number of people behind us that were young people. I say young people, probably in their early 20s, early mid 20s. Like, those could be obviously former students from the Cistercian school there, but they could also be college students. We don't know. They just what drew them to come to daily mass at 6:30 in the morning when they could have been sleeping in or doing anything else.
Yeah, on a holiday week where they might not have to be going to work. I think part of it too is what time do they select? At Seton, it's actually at 8:30. So if you're like an 8 to 5 go to work at the office kind of guy, that's really a hindrance. But I'm sure Father Bradley has timed the masses to be kind of commensurate with what the folks kind of want. So at 8:30, it doesn't seem to be a hindrance. It's not a hindrance for me. I just get up earlier, work, and then go to mass, and then come back and go and work at the house more. Maybe the benefit of Cistercian, if anything, it was too early at 6:30, but it gave folks a chance to get up, get to mass, and then if they were going to work, they can get to work and have plenty of time to be there by 8 o'clock in the morning. So, some folks, and me included, I enjoy focusing on God and church and such, kind of before 9 o'clock in the morning, and then the rest of the day I'm kind of off doing stuff. And I don't know whether other people, certainly some other people could benefit from that, but how do you find those ones that aren't doing it? I don't know. Does it mean that you and your parish council, get the word out at the podium, or get the word out in a bulletin, or
this moment I'm just pondering. Sometimes I just like to ponder and not really have a goal for that itself. A couple things I noticed when we were going to mass this morning, just walking from the car to the church, you ran into a couple people you apparently know, or they know you, and that I'm sure that plays into it, that I'm going to mass, but I'm going to mass with people I've formed some relationships with, that I think that just going to mass and just me and Jesus, that's nice, but if I'm doing it with other people I'm developing relationships with, there's something to that people who invest in relationships with others who are there for prayer and mass, I think that makes a difference. Another draw for me to want to go to the Cistercian monastery was simply a little bit of curiosity about that community and what they're all about and what their prayer looks like. I don't know, I would have been wanting to drive 30 minutes just to go to daily mass at 6:30 when I could have done it right here, but that community itself was a draw. Just curiosity, a group of 20, 25, what do they do? What's their life look like? What's their prayer look like? How do they dress? What do they look like? I think community, the Eucharist, daily mass, it's the mass and it's the readings and the scripture and the homily and receiving Jesus. That's a big part, but there's something to that community that the people who were there at that mass, I think it's part of the draw.
I kind of wish, as I mentioned, I hang out with the Carmelites, I kind of wish they would have mass where the public is invited. And when the Carmelite seculars meet, we do have mass. That's once a month. But commonly about once a month, they also have one of the friars will have a Saturday talk that goes about 2 hours. But they don't do mass for us beforehand. I think they have their own little internal friar mass, but they don't make mass available for us. And I've thought a few times about mentioning it to the friar, I guess the head friar, but I haven't done it yet. Because I think that would be nice. Of course, that drive as well is even a little longer than the drive we had down to see the
Cistercians.
The Cistercians. And then that sort of also dovetails into, for you, obviously living by the church is easy. For me, I've got an 8-minute drive to go to Mass, and I've been talking about how it'd be nice to have the church like, a block or two away, so I just get up and walk over there. But I don't know where else to take that part of the conversation necessarily.
I guess my point. I mean, there's still a richness in, and we can talk about this. I mean, hearing the Word of God and the little things all of us get in hearing the Scriptures, and it doesn't mean that it hits us right then. It might hit us later in the day. So the richness of the liturgy of the Word, and the priest will say something. I would imagine that can spark an idea, and receiving Jesus is it's a great way to start the day. It doesn't mean challenges won't happen later that day, but just it's a nice way to start the day in prayer. So that's like part A. But part B is I think that there's something about developing relationships with the people who are coming, or the priest that's there, or the deacon that's there. But if it's just forming relationships, I think is a key part of the whole idea of wanting to be at Mass.
I mean, I certainly know Father Bradley. We've been out to lunch, and I goof with him a little bit afterwards about different topics. And I guess I dare say with he and all the priests, we could be in confession and kind of have dovetail topics that will come up in the conversation before I exit that, we all can kind of chuckle about. Confession is certainly a sacrament, and it's important to Catholic Christians to go through that, but it doesn't have to be just all super serious. You can have some levity in there. And so I know I've said things and they've said things, it's talking about, Vietnamese food, or, it could be, if you're with a Vietnamese priest or something like that, it can be as simple as that. But the relationships, can kind of grow. I mean, the family that you mentioned, what seems to happen is most of us, as far as I can tell, kind of all sit in the same place every Mass morning. So the ones that you were talking about always sit to my right during Mass. And I've seen them also in Sunday Mass. They move around more there. But so it's just, eventually I think I became acquainted to them only about a month ago. Maybe 2 months. Time flies when you're old. But I actually kind of do covet a little bit more of relationships. On some Wednesdays, the gentleman who runs the Saturday Bible study will sometimes come in on Wednesdays, and then he and some other guys, a handful of guys, will go to a Wednesday morning lunch, breakfast I should say. Kind of like what you do with your men's group on Friday mornings. Mm-hmm. So that does happen, but it's not like an every Wednesday thing. It's kind of he gets the idea to do it, and then they all go to McDonald's. So it is what it is. But it's I think fathers like you, and I know Father Bradley would like to have more community happening with that crowd, and I'm sure much more happens than I'm aware of. But because I know the women's group, there's a women's group that meets on those Wednesdays as well. Because the one Wednesday, I've only been to one of them, but that Wednesday that I was there was a women's crowd, and the gentleman that arranges ours had mentioned there was one, and one of the ladies that sits in front of me in Mass was at that women's table. So I know they do some stuff.
But here's at least in my parish in Quincy, here's an observation. Maybe spirituality for men. This might be a good topic. The vast majority, with the exception on Fridays, we try to get the men together, retired men, go out for breakfast after Mass. But other than that, and you've seen this back in Quincy at Blessed Sacrament, the vast majority of our daily Mass people are not men. Talk about what your thought, and even going to Seton this last couple of days. I see men, but they don't. I don't know that they're half.
I don't think they are. In fact, we had talked about this, and I had done some mental calculations while I was in church one day, and kind of came to the conclusion that at Seton is probably about a third are men. But on the other hand, at your weekday Mass, it's way less than that, men. I mean, the first obvious thing, men are more the breadwinners, and so, I mean, if you're retired, well then, okay, you don't have that excuse necessarily, but it could be that some large percentage is just men that are more focused on the breadwinning thing. Now, then it kind of goes back to, well, maybe there needs to be a different time scheduled. And there is a Mass at Seton at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday only. So, I mean, you get the chance, if you did that, you're done by 7:30, you get to most places by 8, and you're good. Is it more that the women are more in tune with religion than men? It certainly could be. I don't know whether the conversation is more prudently brought up that we want to bring more men into the mix, or just bring everybody back, because as you kind of intimated a little bit, that, and it probably is the same for most denominations, but certainly the Catholic Church, there's less and less Catholics coming to Mass. And so, if you had a choice, you'd probably rather have more men and women together rather than trying to focus on the men. But I'll let you decide, maybe your focus is getting the men to come because they're more the spiritual leaders of the family, and at least that's what I was told when I was married. That getting the men more involved might mean getting more in for everything.
And there was a 12 years ago, 13 years ago, there was a book written by a couple of Catholic priests, and a lot of dioceses were studying this book. It was called, I believe it was called Rebuilt. It was about a parish near Baltimore, Maryland, that they saw a resurgence in Catholics attending Mass, and it seemed that what I remember from that book was they tried to focus on particular men to draw them back into practicing the faith, because if they got this dad or this dad and this dad, then this dad would pull his wife, his children, his friend here, his friend here. It would be a domino effect, and so they focused on particular men. And so I just remember that that bringing men back in can have an impact in the rest of the community. I just remember that.
Well, that's possibly, and I may be misspeaking too much into this, but maybe the alpha male, the one that sort of the pack will follow. Maybe they're looking for the alpha males that would want to do that. But I'm sure it would take out. Maybe it's easy for you guys to identify them. I am not so good at identifying alpha males without at least some decent amount of conversation with them. But what had just occurred to me, you had kind of along the same vein, you had Father Larry, I think, was starting a bunch of activity with one type of organization of getting more men involved. And then that sort of dovetailed into the Acts retreats.
Actually, I think for him, that's a priest in the St. Louis Archdiocese who's a good friend of mine, and you got to know through the association with me. But it's the Acts retreats that he was involved in and still is involved in St. Louis that pulled that whole group in a continued direction. After Acts, what should we be doing? And they've started something called CTM, Catholic. I'm gonna embarrass myself because I don't remember what the T stands for.
Theological.
You think theology would be it, but it's something else. It'll come to me in a moment. CTM, but it's trying to get men more involved in their faith, and they're doing a lot of neat things down in the St. Louis Archdiocese that seem to be working, bringing men together more than just Acts retreats. It can be it sometimes is after an Acts retreat or leading men to eventually make an Acts retreat. Community of Transcendent, there it is. There's the T. Community of Transcendent Men. It's a priest, and they got a board of about 10 guys doing fabulous work down there, and they're doing. He tells me a lot of these neat things, and I can't retain it all. But having guys come, usually in sessions of 6 or 7 sessions in a row, once a week. And they're hearing from other guys, a little bit like retreats that men make, where you have a speaker giving a talk, and then men are sitting at tables, and they hear the talk, and then they share their own insights from what they just heard, and then they come back and have another talk. It's that same kind of format where men are encouraged to be with one another and hear a talk that hits their own lives, and they talk about it with each other, and they find that the men are growing, and it's leading them to deeper faith.
Yeah, I'm on the Acts retreat team, but I'm at, as you know, St. Paul's in Richardson, and they're struggling with, there's team guys like me that want to have more retreats, but they can't find any more men that are willing to join and spend the weekend in prayer and discernment and spirituality and stuff. So for churches that haven't done it, like you guys, you've thought about Acts a little bit. It's certainly much more popular down here in the South. It started in San Antonio with John Paul II, kind of indirectly inspiring the fruition of that whole organization. But certainly Acts is a way to get more men involved. And I know St. Paul's Church wants more Acts retreats, but they just can't find the men to join and go. So they have it as well at Seton, but I haven't joined that group because I've been part of the St. Paul's group. But certainly, yeah, that's one idea. I just kind of brought it up because I knew that Father Larry had, through your talking and his talking, sort of evangelized that he was doing that. So, but no, I don't have any answers to the secret. It really, I think, primarily has to be the Holy Spirit that somehow gets into a person, a guy or a woman, and makes them search for, there's something more, something missing, which is kind of the theme that I have every time I kind of want to do more religiously is something's missing, how can I fill that void? So the latest being the Carmelite thing that kind of circuitously put me where I am. So
But the things that seem to draw men are, we have our own men's group at the parish. They meet once a month on Tuesdays, and what seems to draw them is having food. They like to drink beer, but not large amounts, but you got to have it, and having some kind of a talk that someone doing some sharing with the group that goes deeper than politics and sports, which men generally like to talk about anyway when we're shooting the
crap.
Yes, but there's something beyond politics and sports which all guys like to talk about, but going deeper. But I think my sense is that the men that are part of the men's group, a lot of them already have separate prayer groups. I'm not sure where they're formed. I think Quincy, the big thing is called Cursillo, and Cursillo's has elements. I can't compare Cursillo to Acts because I've never been on an Acts retreat. But Cursillo would be men's only and women's only. But a lot of the prayer groups, I believe, are formed from those Cursillo retreats. People begin prayer groups after they meet a Cursillo together.
But within your town, the Cursillo group probably wouldn't be just your church. It would be, 2 or 3 different churches members that are in that group.
Correct. So I don't know how that,
where an Acts retreat, you go, it's like a 3 or 4 day weekend, and then you're done. I mean, you have that bonding that you can have, through that happens afterwards. There's really no follow-on in Acts. I mean, what ends up happening, you can perhaps become a team leader, like I am, for holding the next retreat. But it really is more to like enlighten you and empower you to go off and do whatever your calling is, not so much to have follow-ups related to Acts per se, although obviously, the 20% still do. The 80% don't come back and be part of team, would be kind of my understanding, in the Pareto world.
Well, it's interesting. Our own men, a month ago, it was maybe 3.5, it was November 4th, 3.5 weeks ago, they did their own retreat. We wouldn't call it, usually when you think retreat, you're thinking 2 or 3 days, but this was just a retreat night for any man who wanted to come from the parish. It was on a Friday night, and they had, it was based on, they just picked a topic. Their talks were on miracles, and they had 3 different men gave 3 different talks on miracles, and then we had Eucharistic adoration, and only 30 minutes long because that's all you had time for in the schedule. It was interesting. A lot of the guys who had never really had experience before with Eucharistic adoration, we went inside church and we were there for 30 minutes, and many of them were impacted by it. I mean, they loved the talks, they loved the fellowship we had in the room that we gathered, but then we went to church and had adoration, and the common response was it was too short. Because when you do adoration, it takes usually 5 minutes for us to bring up the Blessed Sacrament, and you do an opening song, and then you get some music. They had some music there, it was nice, but then you close up with benediction and reposition. That takes 10 minutes. So they only had maybe 10 or 15 minutes of really time to talk to Jesus, and it was just, for them, it was too fast, too short.
Well, did you guys talk about having a follow-up or anything?
No.
Or was any names and phone numbers shared for like an email list to say, hey, let's do this again in December?
I think that the parish's tradition has been, they've only been doing this, actually the men call it a conference. The women call that, they do a women's evening. They call that retreat. The men, for whatever reason, they don't want to call it retreat because they think that scares men. They call it a men's conference, and they've only done it once a year, and it's always been a one-nighter, and it's usually always in November. But I think it'd be kind of neat. I offered I think the Holy Spirit may have been working on this one. About 2 months ago, I was talking to another man who happens to be a member of that group, and he's an older gentleman, and he told me there's this place south of Pittsfield, which would be about an hour away from Quincy. It's basically a hunter's lodge, but it's a really nice lodge. And I decided one day, it was a Saturday, I wasn't preparing a homily on a Saturday. This is maybe a month ago. I ride a motorcycle, we both ride motorcycles. And said, I'm going to write down and see what this place looks like. And it's really nice. Would be very attractive. I'd said to the guys somewhere along the line after we did the conference, we should look sometime at going down there. You can still do the same 3 talks, and instead of doing it on a Friday night from 6 until 9, just do it, get down there at 6 and spend the evening and spend most of the next morning and bug out. You could do the same 3 talks. And you could have prayer at night. You could have some fellowship around a fire Friday evening. Saturday morning, do Mass. Do the next 2 talks, and guys, at 11 o'clock we're done. And you could do the same format, but be overnight in a place away from home. I just thought that just felt very attractive.
I mean, I would do it. The guys that have families are going to have the wives that go, oh, but Johnny's got to be at baseball practice at 9 o'clock Saturday, or he has a game 9 o'clock Saturday, and all of a sudden, Susie has at 8:30 to be at the gymnasium for basketball. So, you're dealing with that. My first thought, I could do that. That's easy. My first thought is you got to deal with, do you have enough guys that think they have the freedom to do that? The other, because what I was thinking, you have that gathering space, you could afford to get, comfortably, you get 20 guys in there, no problem. Mm-hmm. And it's closer to town, so that you're there, and then you can just go right around the corner to the exposition and stuff in the actual the actual church. But I was also thinking that there was that one conversation that I forget who the group was, but they were at the local brewery, mm-hmm. and they had that
Theology on Tap.
Theology on Tap, and sort of try to take that crowd, and you probably wouldn't get all of them, but you get part of those and have them be part of it. Of course that was guys and girls, so I don't know, you'd have to have either a men's thing and a group thing, but you have opportunities where folks are getting together that you can perhaps enlarge and strengthen that.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's lots of ideas, and there's no one magic ringer, but just keep trying different things, giving guys opportunities to develop relationships and do these things together
until it sticks. But yeah, they guys like beer, they like food, they don't want to be in a position where their spouse is going to be concerned about their some family to do that they have to deal with, right? I mean, when I was married and the kids were growing up, I was all over the place on Saturdays. Like an example, Monday nights tend to be a quieter night. Now, whether you get them away on a Monday night for 3 hours, I don't know. To do something like that. But that was always kind of what we figured, was nobody does anything on a Monday night. And that's a great night to get folks away, guys away, or, whatever, for that kind of stuff.
Which what we do, our group does Tuesday nights. They do their men's group, which is kind of what you're talking about. There's really not a lot going on.
So, cool. No, great ideas. Just gotta implement, and the Holy Spirit has to do his thing, whatever it is.